One more thing. Okay. Good Shabbos. Welcome back. Just the other day we were here dancing with the Torah, or at least watching my dad dance with the Torah in shul. It was joyful, it was fantastic, and we completed the cycle of the year 5781 studying the Torah, and we've entered a new cycle now, in year 5782. And you'll remember I mentioned on my vortage during the week that we remind ourselves as we start the Torah anew every year that the Torah has got 70 different faces, 70 different facets to every single verse or word in the Torah. There's 70 different understandings that we need to farm out of the Torah and its meaning. And as we are about to start this new study, starting from Bereshis today, we are going to try and find a new face of the Torah this year. We're starting again. We pressed F5. It's time to refresh and see what the Torah can share with us this year. But now that we're starting out on this journey and getting ready for the excitement of another year of Torah study, I want us to focus and be careful about what might stop us from experiencing a new face of the Torah. Because sometimes when we do read the Torah again for a whole new year, all we do is just justify everything we believed for the past 20 years. And we never learn anything new because, unfortunately, we're too comfortable with what we believe in our preconceived ideas. And this is a lesson I believe we learn already in the creation narrative of Parashat Bereshit. Because we already learn about Satan's tricks right in the beginning of creation. Because what does Satan do in this week's parasha? His favorite trick, one of his oldest tricks in the bag, his main tactic is to distort the truth. Distort the truth a little bit, so it still sounds like the truth, and you've got a whole lie. No matter if you only distort 1% or 2% of the truth, it still becomes a lie as soon as you distort the truth. Because that's what happens with Eve in this week's parasha, right? God says, don't eat of the tree. Eve says, don't touch the tree. So somehow the snake convinced her to misunderstand God's words. I still picture it like, you know that movie, Bereshis movie, Jungle Book? You've got that snake that comes with his eyes and mesmerizes you like this, and then you start. That's what the snake did to Eve, as far as I'm concerned. And I got her to think about the fact, a conversation, because you know what, the snake speaks like this. It gets you all confused. Must have confused Eve into thinking that that's what God actually said. There's in fact a midrash that says the snake actually pushed Eve into the tree. How do snakes push a person? Remember, he still had hands and feet at that stage. So it says the snake actually pushed Eve into the tree and said, look, you didn't die because you touched the tree. And then Eve said, God told us not to touch the tree. So he confused and tricked Eve in that way by just twisting one word of what was actually true. So today I want to talk about truth and how we understand truth and how we perceive truth, because truth is a very, very prominent word that we find in this creation narrative. And when we find ourselves in the creation today, the year 5782, truth is a very prominent and very relevant thing for us to talk about in this day and age especially. So what is the Hebrew word for truth? Emet, or emes, right? Emes is the word for truth. Now, I was reading a commentary by Rabbi Abram Tversky this week, where he points out that if you look at the creation narrative, the 7 days of creation, it starts off with the word Bereshis bara Elokim, right? And it ends off with similar sayings. It ends off with bara Elohim la'asot. And he says, if you take the last letter of the first 3 words of the Torah and the last letter of the last 3 words of the Torah, what do they spell? Let's work it out. Bereshit, what does it end with? Tav. Tav over there. All right. Bara ends with Aleph, right? Let's put the Aleph over there. Elohim ends with Mem. So we put the Mem over there. So same with the first 3 words and the last 3 words of the creation narrative. Because the last 3 words is once again Bara, it ends with an Aleph. And then it says Elohim, which ends with a Mem. And then it says La'asot, which ends with a Tav. So the word Emet is actually in the beginning of God's creation and at the end of God's creation. Now, rabbis say this is because when the author writes a book, he puts his name in the index, in the front, and he puts his name at the end of the story as well. So God's story that he wrote was the story of creation. And Emet, truth, is so foundational to creation that it was even put into the Torah at the beginning and the end of the creation of the first 7 6, all the way up to the 7th day of creation. Now, the Talmud comes along and uses this word Emet in an interesting way. It points out for us the word emet, the word truth. In itself, the letters itself teach us that truth represents stability, something that can stand firm. Because if you look at each of these letters, they've got 2 feet, right? You see the 2 feet? This one's got 2 feet. It's got a big foot and a small foot. This one's also got 2 feet, right? So each of these letters are standing on 2 feet, not like other letters in the Hebrew alphabet like Vav or Shin or Resh, all of these that stand on 1 foot. These stand on 2 feet. So it represents for us stability because they have 2 feet. Not like the snake where we took away his 2 feet, right? But similarly, it tells us, if you look at these letters in the construction of the Hebrew alphabet, the Aleph base, where do we find them? We find the Aleph right at the beginning, right? First letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The Mem, right in the middle of the alphabet. And the Tav, right at the end. So once again, the word Emet is communicating to us the fact that it represents stability and truth and can't be wavered, right? But what is the word for lie in Hebrew, the opposite of truth? It's the word sheker. And the word sheker, where do we find a shin, a kuf, and a resh in the Hebrew alphabet? Are they here at the start, in the middle, or at the end? All 3 letters are right at the end, teaching us that a lie is usually one-sided, lopsided, heavy, saying, this is my viewpoint. You better believe this or you're wrong. That is how a lie is functioning. It's all about taking one side. And that is a tactic of Satan. Satan tries to divide us, to polarize us, so that we fight with each other instead of emet, truth, which is supposed to balance us out, that we can see both that side of the alphabet and this side of the alphabet. So you can see both that side opinion on that side of the table and your opinion on this side of the table. So I think today, more than ever, we need to be extremely careful when Satan comes with his tricks, because I spoke about this just a few weeks back before Rosh Hashanah, in Parashat Kitetse, where I spoke about enemies, not frenemies. You're supposed to make sure that you go out to war against your enemies, not against your friends, your family, your congregation, people close to you. Make sure you're fighting the fight against people that deserve the fight. Because in the world right now, there seems to be this demonic power of fighting, of being, I'm right and you're wrong. This is my opinion and my opinion is correct. My opinion is law. And I think Satan, got to actually take our hats off to him, our keepers off to him, because he actually planned this perfectly to the T. He did a really good job at this. Because look at the timing of what's going on in the world at the moment. Just before the pandemic, the world was all up in arms about fighting each other. We were separating with our political views, with our religious views, societal views. The big word of the generation just before the pandemic was fake news. Everyone had to follow their own news source because they didn't trust the news that one was doing. So there's my news and there's your news. It was separated and polarized like never before. And at that point, the pandemic struck. Perfect timing for Satan, because now, where do we sit today? This is my view on the pandemic. That is your view on the pandemic. And we're all fighting against each other once again. Satan planned this down to the T. We might not be fighting a physical war, but we are fighting an ideological war in this day and age right now. So we learn from this week's parasha to be careful, because that is Satan's plan. We're supposed to be unifying more than ever before, but instead we are more divided than ever in history. Why? Because today we actually have the option to choose your facts, to choose your truth. If you believe something is the truth, all you have to do is go on the internet and you can find a website that confirms it for you. Even if I oppose your idea, you find another website that says the opposite to your truth. We can both come to each other with these facts that are actually not compatible. It happened to me at least 3 times this week where people decided they have to tell me what the true fact is about what's going on in the world. And I was like, okay, well, give me your statistics. And I said, okay, here's my statistics. Our true statistics don't match up. How are we going to have a conversation? There is no foundation, no solid ground. We don't have 2 feet to stand on if we're going to have an argument about something, because our truth is different in our own perspectives. So this is what had played out in the story of creation as well. Because we all know that famous verse where God says, let us make man in our image. And then all of the people start wondering, that God is talking about. According to Rashi, he says God was consulting the angels. So Rashi bases this upon a midrash. There's two different midrashim I'm going to quote for you today. The first one is from Pesikta Rabbati. It tells the story that when God went to the angels and said, should we make man in our image? The angels split into factions on voting about this. There was a, let's call it pro-life movement. There was an anti-life movement. Some of them said, yes, create Adam. Others said, no, don't create Adam. They're horrible human beings. So here's the story. The story says that this revolt against not creating man in our image was led by an angel by the name of Samael. Anyone know who he is? It's another name for Satan. But while the angels were all arguing with each other, apparently according to this midrash, God said, okay, well, they're too busy, let me just make man. So he made Adam while they were still busy arguing, and Adam was made. But the Samael got so angry, got so jealous that his opinion, that his movement wasn't chosen as the right movement, that he decided to come down to earth and try to destroy mankind himself. And the Midrash actually tells us a story that Adam was created in such a perfect light, so tall that his feet were here on earth, but his head was up in heaven, wherever that is. And the animals, when they saw this perfect, beautiful light, the animals even wanted to worship Adam. But then Satan, or Samael, came down to this earth, and he had to try and find an animal to help him out in the destruction of mankind. And who did he find? Sniggery snake. That's who he decided to help him and destroy mankind. And as we know the story, eventually it happened because sin was brought into this world. So that's the one midrash. I'm going to share with you another midrash, a different version of the story from the Midrash Rabbah, Genesis Rabbah, chapter 8, verse 5, which is based upon a psalm that we find. Psalm 85, verse 11. Listen to this. This is what the psalm says. It's talking about four of our character traits, four elements of creation. Kindness and truth. Right? Emet is one of them. Truth. So the angel of kindness and wait, let me just read the psalm. Kindness and truth confronted one another. Righteousness and peace battled each other. So we've got these four elements here, right? Kindness, truth, righteousness, and peace. And they were fighting each other, disagreeing with each other. They were splitting into factions. These four angels split into the yes, pro-life, let's make Adam, and no, let's not make a mankind faction. So they split into factions. So the trait or the angel of Chesed came forward and said to God, I believe you should make man, because my trait is Chesed, and you can't show Chesed unless you have an actual neighbor to love. So you should make mankind. The angel of Tzedakah joined him and came forward and said to Hashem, I believe you should make man, because Tzedakah is acts of righteousness. In order for there to be actual acts, you need a human being who can eat and sleep and do things with his hands. And both of us say, Shap, we've got our okay. We approve this message, make mankind. But then came forward the angel of Shalom, which is the angel of peace. And he said, no. Man is just constantly going to quarrel with each other. They're always going to fight. I say, don't make man. And then comes the last angel, the angel of truth, which I'm talking about today, the angel of Emet, and says to God, man is made up entirely of falsehood. Don't make man. Completely made up of falsehood. So what does God do now? The vote is split 2-2. The Midrash tells us, God then cast the angel of truth, the angel of Emet, down to earth. Why? The Midrash explains. Because man, yes, he does have his faults. Every now and then he does have some falsehood in him. But when the angel of Emet said that man is entirely falsehood, completely made up of falsehood, that was unfair. Because it's unfair to measure mankind in absolutes. And truth, at least heavenly truth, is an absolute. There's truth. There's no other truth or this truth or that truth. In heaven, truth is truth. It's an absolute. So God said when it comes to mankind, however, it's unfair to judge man like that. Because I created man with free will. And because man has got free will, he always has the potential to choose the right thing instead of always completely and utterly being a falsehood. So therefore, God threw the angel of Emet out of heaven because what is Emet? It's truth. And by saying that man is completely false, Emet itself actually contradicted itself. Emet, truth, lied to God in this exchange. How did it lie to God? Not a straightforward lie, but through a subtle little change, an over-exaggeration. Because shalom, did shalom also make a mistake? Yes, it also said there's something wrong with human beings. They're constantly going to fight with each other. But it wasn't contradicting itself. Emet, however, contradicted itself, and therefore God had to throw it out of heaven, even though it was a small little lie, just over-exaggerating of how much mankind is in falsehood. So what this Midrash does to us, other than the fact that it's a cool story and makes us think a little bit about Satan being thrown out of heaven and how that came down, what this Midrash teaches us is how Satan works when it comes to distorting the truth to us, which is something that we have to be very careful with today. Because what is Satan by profession? What's his job?
Liar.
A liar. Also known as, you pronounce liar a bit differently? Lawyer. Yes. He's a lawyer. What does the word Satan mean? It means accuser. He is the accuser of the brethren. That is his job. He's a lawyer. So his entire life is all about knowing how to twist the truth when it comes to judgment, which is supposed to be all about finding emet and finding truth. So this is what he does his whole life long. So when God removed the angel of truth from the vote, then of course the vote was 2-1. And who was left on the opposing side? It was peace, shalom. And would shalom stand up alone against everyone else? No, for the sake of peace, he would join in the vote. So eventually the vote was 3 yeses, you're going through to the final round kind of thing. No buzzer for you. You got the golden buzzer, let's put it that way, right? So there was peace because emet left the situation. And that's a very interesting thing. Because there's a saying in Judaism, it's a Yiddish saying, I can't remember what it is in Yiddish, that says, if you take truth out of any conversation, if you take truth out of any argument, the only thing that's left is peace. Because I'm not arguing for my truth and your truth. Then we have peace with one another. So God decided to make man. Now, of course, truth, giving truth bad rap here. Truth itself isn't bad, right? It was just the angel of truth who was in charge of truth at that stage that made a mistake of how to interpret truth. Because if we carry on with Psalm 85, the very next verse, verse 12, tells us what happened to Emet after it was cast down to earth. It says, truth will sprout forth from the earth. So apparently what this is meaning, according to Rabbi Yaakov Kamensky, he tells us that he explains to us what the Midrash is teaching us, is that there is such a thing as a heavenly truth, which is a complete absolute. But there's also something else. It's not only facts, statistics, quantitative truth. There is also a qualitative truth, which we refer to as earthly truth. Because earthly truth is subjective. Why is earthly truth subjective? Because man was made with free will. We were given a choice. Man was created with not only a good inclination, but also with the evil inclination, the Yetzer Hara. Angels, do angels have a Yetzer Hara? No, they don't. Angels are robotic. So when it comes to truth in the realm of angels, it has to be that heavenly truth that is unflexible, unchangeable, that is completely straight down to facts and statistics. But when it comes to humans, truth changes a little bit and it becomes more subjective. Because if human beings were to be judged by that level of truth, who could stand? No one, not even Adam, who was completely made of light. Not even he could make it in that level of truth. So we learn from this that there's a way we need to approach truth. And this can be explained by one of the greatest debates, one of the greatest arguments or disagreements that we have in the history of Judaism. Who are the two rabbis that are always arguing about stuff? We always quote. Here we go, Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. So they're always arguing with each other, but their argument always ends with accepting the other person's point of view. So the Pirkei Avot refers to an argument between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai as an argument for the sake of heaven. Not like the argument in the Machlokes that we got from Korach. That was an argument not for the sake of heaven. So one of the most famous disagreements between Hillel and Shammai comes in their ruling as to what you should say to a bride at her wedding day. Beis Hillel says you should go up to a bride on her wedding day and say to her, "You are the most beautiful bride I have ever seen." Okay, so you have to say this at someone's wedding when you see the bride. You have to say to her, "You are the most beautiful bride I have ever seen." Make sure your wife is not around while you say it. Okay, but what does Rabbi Shammai say? Shammai says, wait a minute. We need to find the truth. Strict justice. Remember, Shammai was known for walking around with his builder's cubit. Everything had to be perfect. There was no leniency. There was no flexibility. Shammai said, if we have to tell the truth the whole time, we can't say that. Because there are some ugly brides out there, he says. And if you were to say this, you would lie. So what does Shammai say you're supposed to say to the bride at the wedding? You're supposed to say, the bride is what she is. I don't know, but I think he had a red spot right here every day. So who do we follow when it comes to Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai? Do we follow Shammai? It says, don't lie because we are looking after the truth. Truth is important, right? God's Torah is truth. God is truth. His seal is truth. Do we follow Shammai and go only after truth? Tell the bride, tell her she is what she is. Who's correct, Shammai or Hillel? Who is Emet? Who is telling us the truth? Do we follow the fact, the statistic, the absolute truth when it comes to that situation? No, we don't. We follow Beis Hillel. Because Beis Hillel is not lying. He's also telling the truth when you tell a bride, she is the most beautiful bride you have ever seen. Although it is subjective. Because to the groom, to the husband, she is the most beautiful bride he has ever seen. That's why he chose her. You're not lying, but the truth is a bit more subjective than just rigid without any flexibility. So we need to learn from this that we need to view the truth from someone else's perspective. My truth and your truth. We come with these arguments. Be a bit more rigid, be a bit more soft, be a bit more flexible. Try and put yourself in someone else's shoes, and we'll get to a truth that is even more legitimate than the rigid the laws, the percentages, the statistics, the facts that we try and quote. This is what the Midrash is telling us, that we should not look at the raw data when we want to look at truth. That is not how truth works. Because facts change over time. What was a fact 20 years ago is no longer a fact today. So if you're quoting me facts in an argument, I'm going to tell you the only fact that I care about is God's Torah, God's truth. That is the only true and absolute truth action. And God sent Emet down here to earth because it needs to be subjective. And this is amazing because truth is so important to God that throughout the Midrash, throughout the Talmud, we refer to truth as God's seal. God's signet ring is truth. Even in this very Midrash that I quoted for you today, the other three angels are like, what? What's going on? Mind blown. God, that's truth. It's your seal, your signet ring. How could you throw it away down to earth? And what do we learn from this? We learn that the truth that Yeshua is talking about, that Hashem is talking about there, is something that needs to be interpreted and manifest here on this earth. And just a few weeks ago, we were studying John chapter 6 in our Torah Club studies. We came across John chapter 6, verse 27, where it talks about Yeshua saying, God has placed his seal. What is God's seal? Truth on Yeshua. And that is what Yeshua came to teach us. Yeshua came to teach us about the kind of truth where you think about someone else's perspective, where you love even your enemies. You won't find that in a fact. You love even your enemies. Yeshua was hanging out with who? Only the completely righteous who have never sinned in their life? No. Sinners, tax collectors, prostitutes. This is the kind of truth that was manifest on earth through our Messiah, Yeshua. So as we are approaching this new cycle of Torah study ahead of us, this new year, we're going to have another 52 parashas, however many it is because of the leap years. Try and see a new face of the Torah. Not only your own interpretation of what the Torah has always been saying to you, your own perspective of what the Torah actually means, because of course, I know everything, right? Try and see someone else's point of view, another face. Don't use only your own facts and validate it through scriptures completely misquoted from the Bible, which we do, right? Because very often we read our opinions into the Bible. That's why we have so many sects of religion today, because we can misinterpret a verse to say whatever we want it to. That is not how to approach God's word. This year, let's pursue God's word and let's pursue God's truth from every angle that he wants to reveal to us, not just the one that we want to hear. And when we do that, when we search for this new face, God will truly shine his face upon us. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Hello.